What's the deal with them Kana bros? The Kanabo Samurai is a unique unit of the Sengoku Daimyo. I was quite excited about them ever since I saw them at Gamescom because they are a very unique unit. They are a heavy melee infantry unit that do not have a lot of armor, but at 185 they do have a lot of HP to make up for that. Their damage output seems quite terrible at first glance, as they only deal 3 damage with each attack, which is less than a villager. However, the thing that really makes them unique is the bonus damage attached to this, where they deal 6% damage of the enemy's maximum HP with each attack. That means the Kanabo Samurai deals massively differing amount of damage depending on what enemy they are attacking. However, the number of attacks they need to kill any given enemy is largely the same, regardless of how much HP that enemy has. For this video, I wanted to test their strength against various enemies to find out how this actually plays out in practice, because in the chaos of battle, it can be very hard to tell how well any individual unit actually performs. And after having tested some of these units, my hype is a little bit gone. But, you know, I don't want to spoil too much. Maybe you want to tell for yourself. First up, we went up against the Spearmen. Up top we have a 1v1 just to see the individual performances, but the bottom half is probably more interesting because there's the even resource matchup. Spears are half the resources in the Kanabo Samurai, so they go up 2 versus 1 here. And to my surprise, the spears actually win here. I expected the Kanabo Samurai to be similar in performance to the Man-at-Arms, as they are also a heavy melee infantry unit. Maybe one that is just a little more aggressive and deals more damage while having less armor. The thing that I didn't consider when thinking about the percentage damage that they deal is that their performance against low HP units is actually quite bad. We can see this again here in the matchup against the Horsemen. Horsemen are a very mobile unit that can harass. They can deal a lot of bonus damage to ranged units and really usually don't go up in a head-to-head fight with heavy melee infantry and come out doing well at all. But as we're about to see here, the Horsemen actually kinda keep up, and the Kanabo Samurai do win in the even resource matchup, but it's literally within 1 auto attack. So only a very victory, again, against a unit that is mostly centered around being mobile and countering ranged units. So this was the second surprisingly bad performance, for me anyway. Now, the next unit in the basic Holy Trinity of AoE4, of course, is the Archer. The Kanabo going up against these is, of course, a little bit unfair, as ranged units very much benefit from being microed, and I usually leave that out of these tests just to see the raw strength of both of these units. The Kanabo Samurai does win here, but I did have to scatter speed up the footage there in the end because they take a really long time to kill those archers. They can tank the archers all day long, but the archers' low max HP really does give them an abysmal damage. Now, against Man-at-Arms, I expected their performance to get much better. These are units that have quite a bit beefier than the units we've seen before. They have pretty high max HP and also high melee armor, which of course the percent damage at least goes around that melee armor. So maybe this is what the Kanabo Samurai was made for, dealing with high armored, high HP units. But then again, in the straight up battle against the Man-at-Arms, they simply lose. And pretty decisively too, so this is not the role that they shine in either. Next up, I put them against the Knights. This is the early Knight variant for French. I tested this twice, you're gonna see both versions here. In the end, it was very close. The Kanabo Samurai win both times here, but with kind of a varying performance. In the end, this is pretty close. Now, the Knight being kind of the final feudal age unit that is broadly seen in a lot of matchups, I think we can kind of take a brief summary here and sort of conclude that the Kanabo Samurai is not doing so good. Especially if you consider, like, this unit is competing with the other units in the barracks, meaning the Naginata Samurai and the Spearmen. The Naginata Samurai are essentially a reskinned version of a normal Man-at-Arms, the early version of course, and if you think about it, Man-at-Arms kill Spearmen really easily, kill Horsemen really easily, kill Archers really easily, and do, you know, fine against other Man-at-Arms, all of which were matchups that the Kanabo Samurai kinda struggled with. Now, the Man-at-Arms do lose to Knights, but if you think about it, would you counter Knights using Kanabo Samurai when you have spears available in the barracks? Spears that have a brace defense that can stun the knights and also have higher movement speed, slightly higher only at 128 I think versus the 112 of the Kanabo Samurai. They can keep up with knights better because of this slight increase in movement speed when you, for example, trying to chase them down inside your base. So I don't really see the niche that the Kanabo Samurai have, at least for most matchups. At that point I decided to move on to Castle Age units to try and find some more high HP stuff. For the sake of completion I also set them up against the crossbows, which of course are designed to counter heavy units such as the Kanabo Samurai. The interesting part to keep in mind with this matchup is that the regular man-at-arms actually wins the matchup against the crossbow as long as the crossbows don't get microed. Whereas the Kanabo Samurai again don't win here due to the low HP this time of the crossbow. Clearly we need to go higher in terms of the HP. We're starting out for the properly high HP units with the Knight. 230 maximum HP is quite a lot already. This is also a matchup that the man-at-arms lose on even resources. Knights kinda low-key counter man-at-arms. By the way, both of these units here are Castle Age, so it's not an unfair matchup of Feudal against Castle, and the Kanabo Samurai do come out victorious here. There's about half the HP left, so that's a pretty good performance. Now, this got me thinking, what if their performance actually goes up as you go through the ages? Because the enemy units get upgraded and gain more maximum HP with each age. So I kind of repeated the test for man-at-arms. Veteran versus veteran at the bottom, elite versus elite at the top. The first test was in Feudal Age. There the man-at-arms have 120 maximum HP. Here it's elites where it goes up to 180. And as you can see, the Kanabo Samurai still lose against these man-at-arms, but it is a lot closer than it was in Feudal Age and in Castle Age, I would argue. So maybe there's something to the notion that they scale into the higher ages. I also repeated this test with spears. This is Imperial Age spears. So elite spearmen against Kanabo Samurai. 1 versus 2 is still equal resources. Now when making these Imperial Age comparisons, of course, we have to consider that it's not only the enemy units who have their maximum HP boosted, but the Kanabo Samurai actually also gets stronger and tougher with each level. They get 1/1 armor, which is very good because they also get a massive amount of HP on top of this. So they get quite a bit tankier, and this in combination with the increased damage pays off here. As you can see, the spearmen now do get beaten by the Kanabo Samurai. By itself, this doesn't really turn anything on its head. Like the general performance kinda stays the same for the Kanabo Samurai in most of these matchups, but it's still a trend that we should keep in mind for the later parts of this video. Alright, going from those broadly available units to some more special cases, for example these elephants. You will have seen these a lot on the ladder recently. It took like dynasties all over the place, of course. One of the units that is being complained about on Reddit a lot is the healer elephant, and we are gonna look at that in a second too. Here we see the raider elephant, and I did feel the need again to put spears up against this also, just as a comparison, because yes, the Kanabo Samurai wins, but the spears win way faster at equal cost. But maybe the red elephant doesn't have high enough HP there, so let's look at the even bigger elephants. Here's the healer elephant, which of course is a somewhat unfair comparison. The healer elephant has two aspects that do not show in a 1v1, right? They can heal, so other units would benefit from their presence, and also they would benefit from other units, as the healer elephant's damage gets buffed for each infantry unit that is nearby. So both of those things to consider here. However, the Kanabo Samurai of course costs way less than the more than 300 resources spent on an healer elephant. And as you can see up top, the Kanabo Samurai wins the 1v1. Despite being almost half the cost that the healer elephant is, they do lose the 2v2 at the bottom though, so the healing kind of, makes them catch up. But again, also the 2v2 is also massively unfavorable in terms of the total resource cost. Now I do kind of have to ruin the fun here a little bit again by also presenting the same experiment but with spears. Some of you might be saying, well, this isn't really fair, the spears get hard countered by archers, which is usually what accompanies these healer elephants when you see them on ladder, and fair. We're going to look at that in a second too, but I do think we have to make this baseline distinction. The damage of spears at the same cost is way higher per second against something like a healer elephant, despite the fact that they have more than 400 maximum HP. Now at the bottom we saw 2 healer elephants healing each other going up against 4 spears, which again cost the same as 2 Kanabo Samurai, but in this case the healer elephants actually lost. Even through the healing, the spears performed better than the Kanabo Samurai. Okay, but what if we change the equation up a little bit? Let's assume there's also some archers with the healer elephants, and on top of that we are gonna introduce some spears because the healer elephant gets a boosted attack from it. just to really make the healer elephant shine and make it harder for the spears because the archers will kill the spears. If we compare these two examples, you can see that the performance kinda changes. The spears slow down the Kanabo Samurai still by quite a bit as they don't take that much damage from it, but then when the elephants have to tank, they die rather quickly. The whole time the archers actually shoot away, but against the Kanabo Samurai they don't deal that much damage. And up top we can see that the spears end up dying to the last archers, so the side of the Zhuge dynasty wins here. At the bottom we can see that the Kanabo Samurai are cleaning up the last archers. So here's a significantly better performance by the Kanabo Samurai. And I was at first pretty glad to have found this, like finally some situation that I can point people to where that the Kanabo Samurai shines. This is what they can do better. If the opponent has a lot of elephants and some front line with archers in the back that would kill spears super fast, then the Kanabo Samurai does better. That's what I thought at first. And then that voice in my head said, well, just to be sure, you should test this against man-at-arms also, just to check how well they do, because I knew that man-at-arms don't do that well against elephants, but they also don't take that much damage from archers and they kill spears pretty fast. So I ran it again. Here's 10 man-at-arms against the same combination of units, and the elephants do tank quite a while. Spears kinda die immediately, but the elephants, you know, high melee armor and they do heal each other. In Feudal Age, men-at-arms only have 10 damage, so this melee armor actually hurts them quite a bit, and it shows. But as you can already see, once the elephants are dead, the archers are no match for these guys, and the men-at-arms actually have more than enough HP left over to end this. So where's the advantage? Again, here's the end result from the fight of the Kanabo Samurai compared to the Naginata Samurai. In the end, even in this constructed scenario that was supposed to show the strength of the Kanabo Samurai, men-at-arms just do better. This was where I started to lose my mind a little bit, because I was bending over backwards to try and find a situation that really makes the Kanabo Samurai shine, and this still wasn't it. The only thing we can do here is take the same principle but go further. Let's move to Castle Age and just run the experiment again with, you know, an even higher HP unit than the healer elephant. Here's a war elephant protected by 2 spears, 2 men-at-arms and 6 archers. Yeah, here's against spears at, you know, the spears are kinda at a resource disadvantage, but as you can see, pretty big W for the side of the Zhuge dynasty. Now, repeating this test with men-at-arms was now kinda the kicker, right? Here's the Naginata Samurai against this same combination of units, and if the healer elephant was good against the man-at-arms, the war elephant is yet better than this. It has high damage, it deals AoE damage, so it can like attack several man-at-arms at once. And as you can see, it tanks these for a really long time. The war elephant dies very late in the game, and the man-at-arms end up winning this fight, but only barely. It's a fairly close one. And keep in mind, the spears lost this pretty hard. This is how the spears did, and this is how the man-at-arms did. Better, but not a blowout exactly. For the same resources, here are 9 Kanabo Samurai. I was really hoping that this would be a blowout. With this many units types on the field, luck becomes kind of a factor depending on what gets focused down first and what doesn't. But I think in the end this should kinda even out here. The frontline dies remarkably quickly, even the Castle Age man-at-arms die rather fast. It's also interesting that the last Castle Age man-at-arm died after the elephant because the Kanabo Samurai are that good at killing it. And in a relatively short amount of time, it becomes clear that the Kanabo Samurai clean up. Finally, a situation where the Kanabo Samurai do better than both spears and man-at-arms at the same resources. Spears lost completely, man-at-arms barely won. The Kanabo Samurai obviously took some heavy damage, some are barely alive, but only one died fully. So this is still a more convincing performance than the man-at-arms in my opinion. So the Kanabo Samurai do well against the most high HP unit in the game, in a situation where it's also protected by archers so that spears aren't an option. Not a completely unrealistic situation for a real game, but pretty specific nonetheless. There is of course one other scenario that a lot of people will have thought of when they first heard of this unit, and that is going up against the Order of the Dragon. All their units have massively boosted HP and therefore take massively more damage from the Kanabo Samurai. We're starting out with Spearman 1v1 up top, which happens to be even resources already. Same goes for the archers at the bottom. And keep in mind, this is Feudal Age, and the Kanabo Samurai lost against the spears in Feudal Age. It, however, wins against the Gilded Spear up top. It also finishes off the Gilded Archer at the bottom way faster than it did the regular Feudal Age archers. Next up, we have the Gilded Man-at-Arms. This unit costs more than the Kanabo Samurai, so the 1v1 is actually unfair to the Sengoku side. At the bottom, we can see, however, that the Kanabo Samurai at even resource actually do really well against this. And keep in mind, they lost to the regular Man-at-Arms at even cost. Conversely, regular Man-at-Arms at even cost lose to Gilded Man-at-Arms. So the Kanabo Samurai do better against Gilded Man-at-Arms. And I'm not even going to mention spears because they completely shit the bed against Gilded Man-at-Arms. After that, we have the Horsemen, Gilded Horseman, of course. This was a very, very close fight in the Feudal Age, where the Horsemen got within one auto attack of winning the fight, and here we can see it's very close again. The reason why it's so close is that I screwed up during the recording, and this is not actually even resources. The Kanabo Samurai is at a disadvantage here and wins anyway, which means this is a significant improvement to the matchup against the normal Horsemen. Next up is the Gilded Knight. Insanely expensive unit, costs 480 resources, so the 1v1 is kind of completely unfair, but still. I put it in for completionist's sake, and at the bottom, the 3 versus 1 at even recourse, not a chance for the Gilded Knight, because their very high maximum HP makes them annihilate them. Then we also have the crossbows. Gilded crossbows are the backbone of the Order of the Dragon army. They do so well against so many things. Of course, that requires micro. Here, unmicroed, they take a lot of damage, and keep in mind, the Kanabo Samurai lost to the regular crossbow. Again, doing much better in terms of the damage output against the Gilded Crossbow. So, yet another plus for the Kanabo Samurai when it comes to going up against the Order of the Dragon. I also wanted to include this clip with Gilded Landsknechte. They don't do too well here, but it feels worth mentioning because the Kanabo Samurai are smaller in number because they're so expensive and as a result take less splash damage than other units would in the same position. So, you know, probably another plus for the Kanabo Samurai when it comes to going up against Order of the Dragon. Which, you know, what a turn of events, kinda. On the whole, every unit here performed significantly better than they did in the normal version. And pile on top of that, the performance of the Kanabo Samurai scales to the Imperial Age. So against Imperial Age gilded units, they will do yet better than what we've already seen. So this is finally the actual place, I think, where Kanabo Samurai are the best option. They murder those elite gilded rich parents pricks of the Order of the Dragon. Each of their baseball bats has like "Eat the Rich" engraved in them because that's the point of them. They're protecting the fucking poor regular worker of the feudal age. They are all diehard communists walking the party line. Alright, to finish up this video before I lose my mind, in this test I also figured out that if you put the Kanabo against Lords in an even amount, they do a lot better than Man-at-Arms. The increased HP from the Lords is just something that the Kanabos basically ignore because of their percent damage. It's also kind of another working class hero against Lords story, but that's neither here nor there. I have to add that this is kind of an unlikely scenario though, because the House of Lancaster player would be very much incentivized to pull back those wounded lords and save them, and then your Kanabo are just back to attacking Spearmen and Hobbler, which they are not at all good at. So if there are pure lords coming and harassing you, then Kanabo are probably a good way to go. Other than that, I'm not sure. The flip side, we also have some specific matchups where the Kanabo Samurai are not just bad, but just so terrible. For example, here's the Mustofadi Warroir, which of course is a kind of melee crossbow that only Marley can build. And they cost less than half of what a Kanabo Samurai costs and have some pretty massive bonus damage against heavy. With their absolutely tiny maximum HP, they actually beat the Kanabo Samurai, hard countering like few other things. So yeah, don't go for Kanabo Samurai against Mali, because not only this, but also the highest HP unit is the Sofa at 195 maximum HP for the veteran version. So even the Castle Age units don't have much maximum HP for Mali. So just don't build Kanabo against Mali ever. Same goes for, I think, China and Jushi. Here we see the Zhuge Nu going up against the Kanabo Samurai. Kanabo Samurai has one ranged armor, but that's honestly not a lot. So these triple attacks by the Zhuge Nu cut through their high maximum HP very quickly. At the same time, they don't take much damage in return because they are small and squishy. Regular man-at-arms way outperform them here, so always go for that. Now, some other fundamental question I came across when testing these Kanabo Samurai was, how do Kanabo Samurai actually attack siege? Because I didn't know how much damage 6% of the maximum HP would be against most siege weapons. So I was wondering if they just torch them like villagers, or do they attack them regularly? And as you can see here, they do attack the rams just like any other unit would. And since rams have 370 maximum HP, they do actually get chunked down pretty fast by the Kanabo Samurai. About twice as fast actually than the regular man-at-arms. So, you know, if you're desperate for some unit to cut down rams, maybe the Kanabo Samurai is an option. Their performance against other siege weapons kinda gets a lot worse though, because the mangonel and the springle don't have nearly as much maximum HP as the ram. And before anyone asks, no, the Kanabo Samurai do not deal bonus damage to buildings. Also, this may be obvious after everything we've seen so far, but the Kanabo Samurai is much worse at killing villagers than the regular man-at-arms, simply because their baseline damage is just way too low. As a result, if you're gonna go for raids, go with regular man-at-arms. Another question I had for myself was, which unit can tank a town center better? Here we have two secondary town centers, both fully packed with villagers. One is attacking a Naganati Samurai, the other the Kanabo Samurai, and they die at the exact same time. So if you are all-inning a 2TC player, go with regular Samurai. In summary, if you're up against lords, elephants, or elitist pricks, go for Kanabo Samurai. If not, don't. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to Trashcan Incorporated. We are always looking for interns. Also follow me on Twitch. I'm gonna be streaming in the next few days there and trying out the Kanabo Samurai in real circumstances to try and see if I was right or wrong about them. Other than that, I wish you the best of luck on ladder, and with that, I'll leave you. Bye-bye.